All right, welcome back. Thanks for logging on and tuning in. If you haven't already done, hit that like button and subscribe. That way you can keep coming back over and over to hang with us and our fantastic creative guests in the arts and entertainment world. I'm Allison Ingraham, and right now we are at the Green Toad Bookstore in Oneonta, New York, and we are hanging with author and Mayor of Cooperstown, Jeff Katz. Thanks for hanging with us, Jeff.
Thanks for letting me come on.
So, give us the book blurb to your new book, Split Season 81.
Yeah, so Split Season 1981 is about the baseball strike that hit in midsummer of 1981. There had never been a mid-season sports strike in history. So unlike other things that have happened subsequently, for that year there was baseball, there was no baseball, and then there was baseball. So it was a very disrupted summer. It's also the first year of the Reagan presidency. There's a lot of cultural moments that happen around that, and I'm going to be 55 in September. To be 18, almost 19, 1981, that was a major thing to happen. And it was a major thing to happen to this country. And oddly enough, until I wrote the book, there had never been a book about the baseball strike of 1981. So I got to be the one to tell the story.
That's fantastic. Now, this is your second book, right? The Kansas City A's, The Wrong Half of the Yankees, published in 2007. That was your first book, right?
Right. I've always been a big baseball fan. I mean, I live in Cooperstown now. I'm the mayor of Cooperstown. But even before that, I would visit Cooperstown as a baseball tourist at least once a year. And I've always read a lot of baseball books. So I had thought I would like to write a book. Everyone thinks they would like to write a book. But I figured I could write a baseball book. So the Kansas City A's book is really about kind of a business manipulation story of the 1950s that everyone knew about, but nobody had kind of dug deep into it. So I wrote that book, and it got a little attention. The New York Post wrote about it. I got some nice attention. But I realized I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed the research part. I enjoyed the sitting alone and writing part. I enjoyed talking to old ball players and people involved in events. So it really set me out on a path to figure out how to write more. And again, I stumbled on kind of a business and baseball story that had never been told in book form.
That's awesome. So what was your inspiration to becoming an author?
I always would write sometimes on my own. I didn't go to school to be a creative writing major. I went to SUNY Binghamton down the road from Oneonta. I was a poli-sci major, which came in handy when I became mayor. But I always would write. Sometimes I'd write at home alone. So it was a little bit of a constant theme in my life. I had once spoke to one of my son's high school classes when I think the Kansas City A's book had already come out, and I was working on other things. And one of the students said, well, you know, I don't really want people to read what I write. And I said, well, then you wouldn't write it. Once you do the work of actually writing it, you've kind of accepted that you want someone to read it. Otherwise, you would just think it, right? You wouldn't need to write it down. So I liked writing. I think enough of myself that I feel people would want to know what I have to say on something. So like I said, the A's was the first attempt to write a book. I had no training, but I read a lot, so I know how books flow. Split Season is a much better story. It's an entertaining story. It's a cultural story. You know, I tried to weave in enough kind of pop references to make you feel the place of what 1981 was like. So I just enjoy the whole process. It's fascinating.
So you're also the mayor of Cooperstown. So being a sports fan and being mayor, do you find that your fandemonium and your mayor are merging?
They merge a lot. I work very hard to make sure I'm not like a fanboy when I meet people. Yeah. And over the years, I was elected first as a village trustee in 2005. So I've been in village office for 12 years. This is my 6th year of being mayor. So I've met pretty much almost all of my baseball heroes. And I met Barack Obama. And I've met, like, musical heroes. But, you know, you have to have some kind of dignity when you're in the mayoral role. Yeah. So, I mean, I do kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I intercede into situations. I will introduce myself. It's much easier to start a conversation with, "Hey, Jeff Katz, Mayor of Cooperstown." You don't get blown off as much as when I was just like, "Hi, I'm Jeff Katz." So over the years, some guys I'm not friends with anyone, but acquaintances. I see them annually. But part of my mind, I'm like, I'm still that little kid who, was 18 when the strike hit in 1981, who now has met some of these guys, and in the researching the book, talked for hours and hours and hours to certain players who I really loved and thought highly of. So, but I do a good job of compartmentalizing. So as mayor, I'm mayor.
Yeah.
As fan, I'm fan. Because I don't want to look silly, because I mean, I don't mind looking silly for me, but when I'm in the role of mayor, it's not just me, so you got to have some dignity.
That's got to be hard to do.
Sometimes it's harder than others.
So Cooperstown has the Baseball Hall of Fame and the World Wrestling Hall of Fame? Or what is it the Boxing Hall of Fame? There's one of them.
There's a Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota, close.
Canastota.
But Cooperstown, I'll just take the question from here.
Go ahead.
So Cooperstown, is most known for the Hall of Fame. It opened in 1939. Cooperstown was famous before through literary reputation. James Fenimore Cooper, who wrote Last of the Mohicans, the first great American novelist, his father is the one who founded Cooperstown. So even before the baseball angle, Cooperstown was known internationally as the home of the great James Fenimore Cooper. Now we're kind of known as the Hall of Fame. However, we have a fine art museum, the Fenimore Art Museum, the Farmers Museum, which are right on the village border. They draw, over 100,000 people a year. Further up the road, we have Glimmer Glass Festival Opera, which draws tens of thousands of people. Brewery Omegang, which is really every year gets more and more known. It's about 5 miles out of Cooperstown. We have other local brewers and distillers. We have beautiful Otsego Lake right in the heart of Cooperstown. So there's so much to Cooperstown. And I'll admit that when I was a baseball tourist, I came to the hall, I got some pizza, I went back to the hall, I got some cookies, and I went home. So I certainly was not knowledgeable or even open to what else was here. Now that I live here in Cooperstown, it's hard not to see the wealth of things that are available. And I've met, through the mayoral role, people who are in the opera world, who have no interest in the baseball world.
Right.
In fact, a few years ago, there was an article about me in the New York Times, which started with me at an opera party. So the people at the opera were like, this is the greatest thing for us, because we're never on the sports page. We reached a whole new audience because you're in between all these worlds. So there's so much to Cooperstown. You could come, look, we live here now, but you could come for a week on vacation and do different things every day and never be bored. And it's beautiful country around here too. So
it is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful up here. And did I read that you're doing something coming up for Fenimore?
Oh, my son Nate, who is high-functioning autistic, is in his mid-20s, 26. One of his obsessions, and he has many, is he draws strip malls obsessively. And when he started drawing them, he would draw, some of his works were 13 feet long. They were just huge strip malls. And his first show was in New York City, which is odd. Whose first show is in New York City? Since then, he's had shows in the Adirondacks, and this summer at the Fenimore Art Museum, there's an exhibit called Nate Katz's Cooperstown, and in his style, it's a very kind of primitive folk art style. It's colored pencil drawings. Mm-hmm. He drew a lot of Cooperstown locations, and they're just brilliant. They're very evocative. They're quirky. He's got his very own style, and we had the opening Thursday night, and it was fantastic.
Oh, that's great. Do you still have your blog? If you do, tell us about it.
Yeah, so on and off, this is probably my inexperience as a writer. There are certain things I'm really dedicated to for a while, and when they kind of run their course, I leave them behind. So one blog I had written for a period of years was called Mission of Complex. And you can just find that, missionofcomplex.com, I think. And it was the story of my wife Karen and I raising Nate, and the ups and downs along the way. And the whole point was not, woe is us, we suffer, or how lucky we are that our kid isn't in worse shape. all my point was they were funny stories, they were interesting stories, they were emotional stories, and Karen and I knew when Nate was 8 or 9, we were just desperate for some future. We needed to hear from parents of kids who were in their 20s, not that Nate would be this or that or something else, just something, because it feels hopeless at 8 or 9. And that's a lot of the feedback I got from parents all across the country, like, thank you so much, this helps. And we've never been shy about it. You know, some people, if there's something in their family, they don't want to talk about it, don't say he's different, don't laugh at him, but, you know, he'll do ridiculous things that you have to laugh. Like, not laughing is not the normal reaction. So Mission of Complex still exists. There's hundreds of posts. And when people find it, they, like, really get into it. I also wrote a blog called Maybe Baby, or You Know That It Would Be Untrue. So if you're a rock and roll fan, Maybe Baby is a Buddy Holly song. You Know That It Would Be Untrue is a line from The Doors' Light My Fire. And there are 52 stories, like what if rock and roll history. So I'm always intrigued by that. You know, things usually turn on the smallest thing. They're not like big things. So the first story I wrote, the famous story about when John Lennon met Paul McCartney, was John was playing in a band and Paul came and kind of had to prove himself and play. He played an Eddie Cochran song, 20 Flight Rock, a classic rock and roll song, and John was impressed. But I wrote a story like, what if Paul had picked one of those cheesy songs that Paul likes and John was like really nasty to him, which John was as well. It would have all fallen apart. So I'll write a whole story, and then at the end I'll have a paragraph in bold that says what actually happened.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, but it ended up being kind of like a self-created writing class, because I would write some stories as third person, some I would write as interviews, some I would write as like internal monologue, some I would write as first person accounts. So it was all different stories, and they're all really well researched, so they come across as very real till you get to the end and get this true story. So real that a couple of months ago I got an email from a Beatles publication in Germany asking if they could publish my interview with George Harrison. So I said, listen, I hope you read enough to realize it's not real. They're like, oh, we didn't realize that. So they were hooked. I also wrote a story about how Elton John was going to get married to a woman in the late 60s. And the real story is he like put the gas on in the oven, but he opened the oven door, he put a little pillow on, and he opened all the windows. So of course it wasn't going to work. So in my story, it does work. I ended up getting an email from the ex-fiance saying, have you talked to, Elton John's real name is Reg Dwight, have you talked to Reg, because I don't know how you would know the things you know about our relationship if you didn't talk to him. I said, well, I just did a lot of research, and here's what I found, and you know, I try to make, I watch a lot of YouTube clips to hear how people talk, so, but like, I actually, someone who was in the story contacted me and said, I need you to, like, she was like, can you get me back to Elton to talk to him? I'm like, I don't know anybody. I'm just researching this. So those two blogs are out there, and then on my website, jeff-katz.com, I would write some blog posts about kind of whatever struck me. So I'm always trying to write something.
Oh my goodness. You also have 2 short stories, is that right? Baseball, Fantography, and Play It Again?
Yeah,
Tell us about those.
So Baseball Fantography is a book a friend of mine named Andy Strasberg put together of fan photographs. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
So it's a very cool book. I know Andy for a little while. I contributed a great photo I took of Buck O'Neill at Doubleday Field. But there's a chapter on different topics. So he gave me topics, and the one I really wanted to write about was, it was about statues at ballparks. And he let me have that one, and I wrote about, I used to go to a lot of ballparks. I've been to like 45 ballparks, and major league ballparks, and still have a few to go. But there was a statue of like this little old lady outside the Astrodome. It was like one of the owner's wives. And I just like, it was just this little lady feeding birds, and it said like she loved the Astros. So that's what I wrote about. So that's in Fantography. And Play It Again was probably the origins of thinking about writing something like Maybe Baby. Play It Again is kind of a what if history of baseball. That's really taken different baseball experts, and I am not at an expert level as some of the people who contributed, but they contributed very factual stuff. You know, in 1923, when this guy got hurt, had he not gotten hurt, he was driving in this many runs. But I wrote about a 15-page story if Sandy Koufax had had arm surgery and continued his career through its natural end. So it was real stuff, real names, real situations interspersed with just made-up stuff. And for whatever reviews the book got, the Koufax story was the one that was highlighted all the time. It's like, oh, I wish the whole book was like what Katz wrote. So that was great feedback for someone who had never been published before. And it also whet my appetite about writing. I'm like, oh, I like this. I think this was good, but other people like this, and they want to talk about it. I just posted it on my website, and some people on Twitter had read it. They're like, oh my God, this is great. So so I'm scattered out there. I'm not a big name, but I'm out there.
It's working.
It's working.
So where can people find your books and your stories?
Well, for today, you can be at Green Toad Bookstore, which is a great bookstore in Oneonta, fantastic independent store that really is vital to Main Street in Oneonta. But Split Season's available on Amazon, in bookstores, all over. So I'm out there. You can find me.
Very good. And what's coming up for you in Cooperstown? Anything interesting?
There's always something coming up. So, the summer season is a whole different world because Cooperstown's only 1,800 people year-round. In summer, the hall gets pretty much most of its 275,000 visitors. Induction weekend will probably get, we've just had about 50,000 people the last couple of years. This year will probably be, I think, a little less, maybe 25 or 30,000, but that's a lot of people for 2 days. And the opera is about to start their season in July. The Fenimore Art Museum, they're already in fine form. So there's the whole energy of the village changes in summer, and I think it's a positive thing. I mean, it brings in a lot of different people, and it keeps our businesses healthy, and then when everyone leaves, we have good restaurants in the middle of January you can go eat, so that's nice.
That is true. Well, guys, it's been a blast. We've had so much fun hanging with Jeff Katz today. I'm Allison Ingraham, but before we go, we would like to thank our partners at Famous Faces and Funny, Space Coast Comics, the Florida Book News, and Wordfire Press, and our great friends at Some Unique Magazine. These are the folks that share our videos all over the World Wide Web, and we hope you will too. Don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment, let us know what you think of today's show and our guests. You can also check our guest links below. Remember to subscribe, log in, and stay tuned to see who we're hanging with next. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.